Hello, everybody. Welcome into my latest live broadcast. Today, it is the 26th of September, 2023. My name is CareyHolzman, and today, my shirt's getting a little tight. Oh, it's a new shirt. That's why. Today, we're going to finish the build that we prepped the motherboard for on Saturday, was it? And I mentioned to you that Newegg had this deal for a 12900K motherboard and RAM for $399, and they were sold out. Well, the deal's back on right now. I don't make commissions with Newegg, so you don't have to use my link or anything. But the link for it to find this, probably you want to use the link in the video notes to find it. But the deal looks like this, and if you sign up for Newegg's free newsletter, they'll email you every day with what they're putting on sale. They've got other combos. They generally only run one combo at a time, and these combos are usually only available for 24 hours. I would strongly encourage you, if you're interested, don't wait. It probably will be sold out very, very soon as we make this video live. You're getting a 12900K. It's an i9 Intel processor with an Asus TUF Gaming Z690 Plus Wi-Fi ATX motherboard and G-Skill Ripjaw's S5 series, 32 gig, 2 sticks of 16 of DDR5 6000. That's a great price at $398, $399 basically. You snooze, you lose. I've made you aware. I'm sure there'll be comments from people saying I didn't get the notification, or I wish I would have known. I don't know what you want me to do other than go over to your house, knock on your door, and hand deliver personally a message to you. So I do what I can, and it's up to you guys to tune in. There's a benefit to watching live. Things like this happen. I have no control over when Newegg puts something on sale or when they go out of stock. And as I mentioned, I have no affiliation with them. This video is not being paid by anybody but you guys, members and contributors to the channel, make this possible. And that very combo is what I purchased and we put together and prepped on this motherboard on Saturday. My goal all along has been to put it into the other Jonsbo case. We have two Jonsbo cases, a D31 and a D41. The D31 is just a slightly shorter version, otherwise identical, and only holds a micro ATX or mini ITX motherboard. The D41 is just a little bit taller, can hold a full-size ATX as well as micro ATX or mini ITX motherboard. These cases have a few shortcomings. One is that you only get one USB type A up front, even though it plugs into a connector that gives you two. You forfeit the third one since they don't give it to you. Two, there are no fans on this case. You have to provide your own fan. At this price point, I would expect a rear case fan, and a high quality one at that. And that's limited to 120 millimeters, so it wouldn't cost the manufacturer much to include it. Three, you have no hard drive LED and no reset switch. I could live without the reset switch, but the hard drive LED is a real bummer that it's missing or just omitted from this build. Quality-wise, the case is built well. It's solid. I feel like at this price point, we should be getting that other USB port. The monitor goes in here. This piece here, if you've not seen our previous videos, this piece just comes off. And you can buy the case without the monitor. The monitor simply ships separately in a little box. It's a little computer monitor, 8-inch monitor, plugs in there, but you have to wire it. It's not a wireless monitor, so you have to give it power and you've got to give it a video signal. And for some weird reason, which I don't quite understand, I mean, if they were selling the monitor separately, it would make more sense. But given they're including it with this case, the USB cable that they include to hook up this monitor is an external USB cable, meaning you have to run the cable through the case and out into the back of the motherboard's USB port. And you'd think, okay, well, that's not that big of a deal, except you also then have to provide an HDMI input. So you got two cables you've got to run from this monitor, USB for power and HDMI, which again, you will run through the center of the case and out the back into your video card. And you might be asking yourself, can't they power? Didn't you just show a portable monitor that was way bigger than that, that ran off a USB Type-C, that gave it power and provided the video? I did. Is this dirt cheap? No, it isn't. So I'm just imagining your questions, right? So hold on a minute. You can't plug the USB power that this needs onto the USB 2 motherboard header that most motherboards, look, if you're spending $160, $170 on a case, you're probably going to put a modern motherboard in it that's going to have at least 2 USB 2.0 headers that you probably don't even want to use unless you've got an internal memory card reader. They're too slow for everything else, right? So besides, you usually have 2 of them that aren't being used. And they don't even give us 2 USB 2s up here, like the Cougar 410 Mesh gives us 2 USB 2s and 2 USB 3s at 1/3 this price. Of course, it's not made as well, in my opinion. It's thinner. The Cougar 410 Mesh is a thinner material, smaller case, a bit narrower, just a bit cheaper, but by 2/3 as much. And of course, it doesn't come with the screen. But as I mentioned, you can buy the screen separately, and you can even set it onto your desk. You don't have to mount it into the case. But mounting it into the case shouldn't require wiring it. The wires should all be internal, in my opinion. And I think there should only be one wire, or at least they should give you an option of including a little adapter so you could plug it into the USB header. And I can go on Amazon and I can buy one. That's not the point. The point is, at this price point, it should have been included. And then it should also have the option of running the video via USB or via HDMI. Once again, at this price point, giving each builder the control of how they want to wire it. And then beyond that, it should have a little circuit pad here with pins on the back of the monitor so that you leave it wired, and when you push the monitor in, it makes the connection and turns it on. The fact that you have to wire it, again, at this price point, it's a real hard case to fall in love with. If they would address all of this, it would be a perfect case. It's easy to work on. It's a pleasure to look at it. The option of having the monitor or the mesh screen is very unique in the industry. So why they went cheap by basically stealing one of your USB 3 ports and forcing you to take this otherwise elegant and beautiful case and run ugly, unmatching wires out the back. Now, granted, most people aren't going to see the back, but that's home enthusiast, cheapo, non-professional way of doing things. We wouldn't do that in the business world, not in the big corporate world. It's too easy for people to pull cables or cables to fall out or get hung up on things. We want everything in the case. So it lacks a little bit of professionalism. However, I'll leave it up to you to decide what you think of the case. This is the instruction manual. We already built into the D41, the smaller, just only slightly smaller version of this case last week, Friday. And now we'll do the D41, the bigger version, using that new egg combo. And we have an incoming message. It's from Mitch in Vietnam. Hello, Mitch.
Well, Uncle Carey and chat, this is your Uncle Mitch coming to you from central Vietnam, a town called Da Nang, beach town. You don't need to see my face to look at what I'm seeing here. Beautiful. So what I'll probably do is just flip the camera around and go for a little walk, and we'll see what we can see. So yeah, there's a nice 360 view. So I'll just turn the camera around and do that. Bye. Okay, well, I'll try not to do a shaky cam. Over there in the distance, you can see, is the Lady Buddha. I went and I visited that a couple of days ago. That was pretty impressive. And so, yeah, I'll tell you, right now it's 89 degrees and probably 80% humidity, so it's quite stifling, I will tell you. But yeah, this is right off of my hotel. Beautiful, beautiful Da Nang. So yeah, very nice indeed. In a couple of days, I'm going to go a 30-minute car ride a little bit further south to a town called Hoi An, where I'm going to spend 4 or 5 days, and they're famous for, you can get tailor-made suits made quite inexpensively. So yeah, we're gonna get, Uncle Mitch is gonna get set up with some very nice suits. And so there you go. I'll just do one more pan here down the coastline, and yeah, hopefully the sound is good. And it's just too humid out here to stand, so I'm gonna go back to the hotel and the nice air conditioning. So we'll send you another video shortly. Bye.
That is a beautiful video. Well done, and I appreciate so much that I get to join Mitch vicariously. I've never traveled to Asia. I haven't really traveled to Europe either, or mostly anywhere. The Caribbean, the Puerto Rico, the Dominican, not the Dominican Republic, Mexico. I've not left too far from the U.S. and Canada, because I lived in Detroit. We went to Canada all the time. So I like to travel with Mitch vicariously. Let him go through TSA and sit on the plane for 15 hours. So thank you. It was a great video, and we'll hope and look forward to seeing more Mitch's vacation. All right, guys. Now, let me just take a look here in the chat room before we get too involved. Before we begin, I guess I want to say, and I'm going to put a liquid cooler in here, and I haven't decided which one I want to use. We'll take a quick look in the chat room and say hello to everybody. Good to see everyone. Paul O'Brien contributed €2. Says, because my daddy's the best. Calls me daddy, which is kind of weird, but you know, I'm just saying I haven't got any Father's Day cards. Let's see. Luke Greeny, it says hello from a clear and 70-degree Fahrenheit Green Mountain State, Vermont. Gary Tatum says he's been watching some NAS builds in a Jonsbo NAS case. Yeah, they're a little pricey. And I gotta say, I can't understand why anybody would put together their own NAS box. It's just overly expensive, and they generally aren't as compact as something already built, such as Synology or QNAP or TerraMaster. And you might say, well, I want to use TrueNAS or something. Well, just put that on the TerraMaster. It'll totally take that just fine. And there's videos on YouTube that'll show you how. And you don't have to go through all that nonsense. But to each his own. Maybe you like nonsense. I'm good with it. I wouldn't put something like that in a customer's location. It's also not necessarily energy efficient. So for me personally in the business, I want to use product that I just add drives to and configure, and it gets regular software updates. And if something's going wrong, it has a warranty, you know, not individual components necessarily, but the whole thing can go back and be replaced versus changing a motherboard or RAM, etc. But again, I'm running a business, and it's just a particular choice that I make in order to try to make myself more profitable, as well as appear to be to my clients, selling quality products that don't break to begin with. And so there's a consistency among how manufacturers do things, and not necessarily a consistency with how people build things at home. So like when I build, I have to be very consistent in order to reduce support costs and reduce inconvenience to the customer. And when they do call for support, if I don't do everything the same, then I have no idea how I did that one until I go see it. And it's just too time consuming And if I'm doing some warranty work, it's not only damaging to my reputation, it's not only inconvenient to the customer, but I can't bill for that time. And that includes travel time. So to me, if you're building a home NAS or something, I still wouldn't do it. The TerraMaster is so inexpensive, and I'm so impressed with it. Honestly, I don't know why anybody would want to build their own, but some people just want to do it for the challenge of it. You can't argue with that. Dorado Systems contributes $24.99 RON. RON. Forgot what that denomination is called. Greetings from Bucharest. Well, thank you, Dorado Systems. Thank you for supporting the channel. Michael Dane says, bring back Carey a suit. I have a suit. You don't want to see me in my suit. I look like a mafia boss. Peter VZ with €1.24. Thank you, Peter, for continuing to support the channel. David Graham said I missed his super chat. Oh, did I? My bad. Let me see. Scrolling. There's Oystein joining us from Sweden. Welcome, Oystein. There it is. David Graham with a $5 super chat says hello from Fox Lake, Illinois. Right on. Thank you, David. That one slipped by me. Got to keep me honest, my friends. Thank you. Let's take a look. Make David a standard moderator in here. All right. Oh, Oystein, did I say Sweden? I was thinking of Shamim. My bad. Oystein, of course. Oystein's in Norway. Of course I know that. I think what I wanted to say and what I said came out completely wrong. I wonder if my brain is under warranty. It might have some bad memory. My bad. Thank you, Oystein. Carey, do you carry a violin case when you wear your suit? No, it's just a Tommy gun, not a replica. Yeah, I don't know if I have a picture of that. You'll look at it, you'll say, yeah, he looks like a mob boss. I'm not comfortable wearing a suit, so I don't wear one very often, and if I have to, I will. But wasn't there a picture of the tie? Actually, this one doesn't look too bad. Studio. Darn it, I don't have my preview screen on, so I can't see what I'm trying to show you. So I really should do something about that. All right, so it is possible to see me in a suit, but you likely will find the whole thing quite intimidating. And I am uncomfortable wearing a suit. And the whole point of getting a suit in Thailand, and I know you're joking about it, but the whole point is that you could get it tailored very inexpensively. So it doesn't do me much good to bring me back a suit, and then I got to pay all this money to have it tailored. I might as well have just bought it at Men's Warehouse or something. All right, so let's take a look here. Gordon says, surely making your own NAS is more beneficial as you can choose your own components like 10 gig LAN, as using a pre-built one is just the same as people who buy Apple computers. No, I disagree. If you're a hobbyist, that's a hobbyist mentality. If you work in corporate America, that kind of attitude is likely going to get you fired. You see, there are lots of different NAS models to choose from that offer you all that upgradability. So you know, I realize that I have put myself on a platform of enthusiasts, and there are almost zero professionals by comparison. So when I come out here and I talk about the profession, and I talk about the reason why professionals, or at least why this professional does things to stay in business, a lot of the viewers who have never worked in the industry, who have never been self-employed, and have never been held accountable or liable for the downtime that they are absolutely responsible for that basically puts your client in a situation where their employees who are on the clock and getting paid cannot work, and their customers who are trying to pay for service cannot achieve any service while the system is down. So you have to put in cost-effective solutions that are easy to maintain and very reliable. And, they're not going to suck up a lot of electricity, and, your customer's going to get some big electric bill because you just decided to go cheap and use an old desktop or something. But as a hobbyist sitting at home, yeah, you can do whatever you want because there's no rules or policies or liabilities that you're being held accountable for. You do whatever you want at home. So generally, if a home user follows business practices, it's always good for the home user. But if a business follows home user practices, they'll likely go out of business. It's just why I created this channel. It's just too much of the hobbyist mentality. And there's nothing wrong with being a hobbyist and an enthusiast. But to deny the value of professional experience and how you can perhaps trickle in a bit of that into your everyday life would be beneficial if you were open to it. If you're not open to it, you won't likely like my channel because I'm here to provide information you're generally not going to find on other YouTube tech channels because they're primarily run by entertainers. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean that those entertainers are wrong or giving bad advice, but they're not held accountable. There's no consequence for them other than the number of views they get or whether or not they please a sponsor. I don't deal with any of that. I deal with real customers and real problems. And I made this channel to share that experience. And some people don't get that. So we would never, ever piece together a NAS and put it in a client location. It would be far too inconvenient for both me and the customer. We definitely want a solution that we can preferably be able to accommodate upgrade and growth for the client. Many Synology NASs, for example, have replaceable network cards, the ability to add an NVMe cache drive, the ability to use 2 network cards at the same time with SMB3 multi-channel, the ability to trickle power while it's on instead of generating a lot of power and also generating a lot of heat. Also, it costs less. When it's all said and done, it'll cost less to build it, generally speaking, and it'll cost less to maintain it over the years, and it will be more reliable, statistically speaking. And since we're not doing this as a lark, we're doing this to try and earn a living. This isn't something we want to gamble with just to make a few extra bucks and have it cost the client extra money. So that's the logic behind it. So obviously, if you had your own business and you wanted to build your own NASs and support them, and your customers were okay with that, you could certainly do that. And when they failed or when they had issues, you would go out and you would service those, or you would lose your client. And if you have to even go out and service them, you still might lose the client. So we want to increase the statistical likelihood of smooth operations, easy automatic maintenance as much as possible, and we just audit the system regularly, at least once a week. We look at the logs, we look at what's been happening. And the 2 clients, my 2 main MSP clients I've had over 10 years apiece. So what I'm doing might be working. Synology is for home users, Edward says. Again, this is wrong. This is completely wrong. Synology makes some very high-end equipment, and every one of my clients that I have on MSP are all running Synology. It's for small business. If you have a larger business, you'd want a server. You wouldn't want to use a NAS. It has nothing to do with the brand, if it's Synology or QNAP or TerraMaster. It has to do with how much demand you're placing on the NAS, and if you want to have your own mail server, you want to have your own web server, and how many employees will be needing to access that at the same time, whether or not you have applications like perhaps that have databases, SQL databases that need to be on a server. Otherwise, this idea that Synology is not for businesses is purely ignorance. But again, I've been in business for over 30 years, so some rando in the chat room making bold statements like that is quite disturbing. They would distribute such false information. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on members only chat mode, because I'm already seeing all the misinformation. It's already 3 times since I started this feed. Non-members, who are the only ones that are doing this, are contributing false information, and then I have to counter it, and it holds me up from doing my job. So I think for the sake of everyone involved, we're going to turn on moderator, sorry, not moderator only, but paid membership only for the chat room. I think that's the only way I can stop this. And if those people say, well, then I'm not going to watch your video, if I can't interact with you and I'm not going to pay, bye. It's not doing anything for me. So that should be then able to turn the, after a couple of weeks, we'll see who's, people will still be able to watch the video. They can still leave comments. But those comments I have to approve. So I'm going to go over here to, at least for today's video, we're going to make this change. Just have to find where the change is. It's somewhere in here. Where is it? Customization. Members. Okay, so right now we're making this so members will interact with me, and then we can keep the show moving forward without the nonsense. You're still able to enjoy the stream regardless. I just don't have to listen to you or have you disrupt the channel. I don't think it should really be that important to you to have to interact with me while I'm live. And if it is that important to you, then you can help to support this channel. That's the way I see it. Because of the abusers, it's just too disruptive from the live stream. And the people that are members, quite frankly, are the reason why I'm making today's video. I would not have been able to buy any of these parts without the contributions of members. And super chats that come in from non-members. But I must tell you that you have to understand the expense that goes into making these videos. Today's video will have somewhere around $900 worth of equipment in it. And it's done for your benefit, not for mine. I don't need this computer, and no customer has ordered this computer. In fact, if you're interested in purchasing this computer from me, you could certainly reach out to me after the show. I'm just trying to break even on what I've invested so I can have the content. I'm not charging anything for my labor. So I do have a customer that has ordered a computer a couple days ago, and those parts are just now starting to arrive. Once I have that customer's parts, then that will be another build video I'm going to do. And that's the way I used to do videos, was just waiting for customers to order things. And the problem was customers were ordering the wrong things, and customers were getting very difficult, demanding, and some of the customer orders were all the same. It didn't give me much in the way of variety. So I just thought, I'll build what I want to build, and then I'll sell it after the stream. So if you're interested in a build that we've done on the channel, they're not dirt cheap. I'll tell you right now, if you're looking for a $300 computer, don't bother. But if you're looking for, 500 and above, and you want something that's a really good value, I'm your guy. People that buy computers from me universally, they love them. They're rock solid. You can talk to people in the chat room that have machines built by me. I don't have a single upset customer. I like to keep it that way. So the other thing, that I failed to mention is our friends over at $300 Data Recovery. If you ever need data recovery services, you will quickly find that they are profoundly expensive, upwards of $1,200 to $2,500, and can take 2 months without a guarantee that they can even get your data back. No data recovery center can guarantee they can get your data back. $300 Data Recovery, they founded the company in 2007 and they named it $300 Data Recovery, and that's still its name in 2023. They're very transparent about what they build. They're very communicative as far as letting you know when they receive your hard drive or solid state drive, whatever it is. They let you know the status of it. They will give you a preview of what they're able to recover for you to approve or deny it. Because if you deny it, it's like only $100 for the attempt. If you want it, then depending on how much data it is, it starts at $300. Depends on the size of the drive. And it also depends on whether or not they have to get donor drives to replace parts. They don't just run software. They have specific hardware tools, head swapping tools. They can do firmware and circuit board controller changeouts. They're the real deal. And the fact that they charge so little makes no sense to me. They are the highest rated data recovery company on the planet. If you go to Yelp and look at the reviews for $300 data recovery, they've done over 27,000 data recoveries successfully since 2007 and continue to do more every day. I hope you never need their service. I hope you make backups, but you probably don't. But whether or not, you need data recovery or somebody who needs data recovery, don't pay those outrageous prices from the other folks. Why would you? The small mom and pop operation, they take great pride in the work that they do. They've been doing it so long, they could probably do it blindfolded, so they know what they're doing. And very reasonably priced, beyond reasonable, because if you compare them to the prices of others, professionals, it's like a whole different game. They're like 75, 80% cheaper. And they're faster. I think they're just better. And everybody, if you read the Yelp reviews, generally every single one of those Yelp reviews, with a few exceptions of some nutcases, agrees. It's unquestionable. Vast majority of people who've done business with them love them. So I've been promoting them for years for free. And I reached out and I said, hey, maybe we should do a little promotion, kind of make it official. So we hope that you don't need the services, but if you do, or you know someone who does, you'll remember $300 data recovery. Now, they also have their own YouTube channel at, I think it's either $300 data recovery or 300ddr.com. And they post a lot of like YouTube shorts. So you're not generally watching a 3-hour video from them like you do from me. Let me see if I can find it real quick. $300 data recovery. I'll do a search on YouTube. Yes, yeah, and that channel only has 725 subscribers. And recently, Brian posted this video I'll share with you. Let's see if I can find it. There he is. He's got 2 unrecoverable drives. Unrecoverable in that other recovery companies that charge more than he does, which is literally any professional data recovery universally, they all charge more than him, said that these drives were not recoverable. And, you know, it's a short video. It only goes on for about a minute. And if you're interested in that stuff, be sure and give them a like and subscribe. Because I know what's going to happen for most of you. Something will occur that you need data recovery services. And you're going to remember there was a time when Carey talked about a data recovery company. I cannot remember what it was called. So just subscribe to him. You can look through your list of subscriptions, or you can watch the content. He doesn't post content very often to keep it fresh on your mind. So when the day comes, you've already got the answer and you know what to do. Lou Greeny says, Brian seems like a very cool person. I think he is. I've interviewed him twice on site at his location in, he's in Studio City, Los Angeles. He's very approachable, very down to earth, and very transparent about everything, which very uncommon in the industries, like a magician that's happy to show you how the tricks are done. So that's very unusual in the, I mean, just do your own research. They're, generally speaking, data recovery companies are very tight-lipped about what they do, how they do. Not what they do, but how they do it. Stan says, not a member and I can chat. It may be that because you're blue, I think. I think. I don't know. This is a new setting. I've never used it before. So I think as long as you're blue, you're okay. Planet Cryos says, hello. Welcome in, Planet Cryos. Jeff wants to know how the TerraMaster NAS is working out. Well, the initial synchronization of that 22 terabyte RAID 1 configuration took about 36 hours. Now you can use the NAS while that's happening, but Seagate doesn't do that anymore. They used to. But because these drives were refurbished, I was okay with it checking, you know, for 36 hours the status of the drive. I also asked the folks over at TerraMaster, can I plug a Wi-Fi, because it's got a Wi-Fi area, a Wi-Fi configuration area in the operating system, the TOS 5 operating system. And they said, yeah, any Realtek 8812AU, so an RTL 8812AU, like the shortcut for Australia. The drivers for the RTL 8812 chipset, 8812AU chipset, are built into the operating system. So you would just plug a compatible RTL 8812AU into the USB port, give it a minute to initialize, and then you'll get a list of all your SSIDs. Click on the one you want, hit connect, put in your security code to get on your Wi-Fi, and then unplug your landline, or your, not your landline, but your hardline Ethernet connection, because you've got to be configuring the unit, so you need to be connected to it. So you connect to it as you normally would with your LAN cable, and then get your Wi-Fi device recognized and connected, and then disconnect your cable, and then all you've got is a power plug. Now the power plug, that little wall wart, does get warm, and it gets warm quickly. I kind of feel like it's a little bit, the componentry in it is a little bit, what's the word I want? It could be more robust. They could have put a bigger wall wart, something that wouldn't have to work so hard. It wouldn't get so warm. My concern about it getting, it's uncomfortably warm. It's not too hot to touch, but it's hotter than a wall wart should get in my experience, which implies to me the components inside are too small. The smaller they make them, the cheaper it is. So I understand why they did it, but I really feel like that wall wart should have a larger transformer in it, for lack of a better word, so that it's not working so hard and wouldn't generate that much heat. When it's generating that kind of heat, that suggests to me that it's probably not going to last very long, the wall wart. But I don't know. That's why we run these tests. And if you wanted to know, well, how do I know if a Wi-Fi adapter has an RTL8812AU chipset, we would just simply go over to Amazon. Let me bring up my Amazon page here. I will turn on my screen capture. Here we go. And we'll just type in RTL8812AU, enter. Now, bear in mind, some of these are sponsored and may not actually have that chipset. They might have just be popped up because of the partial search result. I ordered this one, which I should get tomorrow. And this one says right in the title, RTL8812AU. The downside is that the RTL8812AU is only wireless AC, so to upgrade it to get faster Wi-Fi, not quite sure how you would do that. You'd have to figure out how to load drivers in this thing. I had one of these laying around here in Studio B, and I just plugged it in, and that works great, but it's pretty slow. My data transfers from my wireless laptop to the wireless NAS are about 20 to 24 megabytes per second. And when I plug the Ethernet cable in, but still transmit files from my wireless laptop, I get 120 to 140 megabytes per second. So it depends how important that data transfer rate is going to be for you. And again, that's with this cheapie. I'm hoping with this unit here, I'll see 2 to 3 times that, but I just don't know for sure. And I did connect it to my 5 gigahertz band, so I'm not sure, but I'll find out tomorrow when it arrives, and I'll run the tests. But overall, I'm very happy with the TerraMaster. I think it's the best value for a NAS, a pre-built NAS, in the market. Much more affordable than ASUS's options or QNAP's options or Synology's options. Now, it may not have all the apps that you want. I don't use any apps on any of my NASs. They're strictly used as a file share. And it would probably be very unlikely that it didn't accommodate an app you wanted. But it's possible. The bigger name like Synology is going to give you the largest choice of apps. I don't run the apps. Zero. Except for what's needed, like SMB and stuff like that. That's installed by default. What's great when you order from Amazon, of course, is you have that 30-day return period. So if you're curious about it, order one, order it from Amazon, and you have 30 days to use it. And if you want to send it back for any reason at all, Amazon will accept it for free, no cost to you, give you a full refund. So, you know, if you're asking questions about it, that suggests to me that you're interested in it. And very rarely does anybody ever have just one question. I think you'd be a great candidate to buy one and try it and decide for yourself, and then tell us what you think of it, whether you like it or whether you don't like it and why. Because hearing from actual end users is way better than reading Amazon reviews where we don't know if the people are real and we don't know if the people know what they're talking about. Let's see here. Matthew Burden's been a member now for 16 months. Says, good afternoon, Carey and chat. Happy Tuesday. Back at you, Matthew. Thank you. Bull142 said he's still able to post in chat. Good, good, good. Glad to see that. Stan Ristov with £9.99 said, thank you, Carey. I'm doing my house at the moment, so a bit short on the money to become a member. Take this as an apology and have a drink on me. Thank you, sir. Stan, thank you for the contribution. There's no reason to apologize. It's always a pleasure having you here. Alhash says he's going to get this NAS. I don't know what NAS what link is he putting to? Waiting for my tablet to page up. It's a TerraMaster. Page is still blank. Refresh it. Rack-mounted 4-bay NAS. You know what? I was thinking about getting that for one of my clients. It's, what is it, $699, isn't it? It's a bargain. And then I would throw an NVMe caching drive in there. I only have one client with, no, I've got 2 clients with racks. And that would absolutely be an improvement to the Synology units they both have. Because the Synology units are only, on the level of NAS that I recommended to them, 1 gig was good enough. But they do have 2 1 gig ports, and with Synology's DSM 7.2, they've enabled something called SMB3 multi-channel, which means you can run 2 Ethernet cables to each of the 1 gig LAN ports, and it will divide the load automatically. You don't have to do any special configuration, because before the only thing you could use it for really was either failover or link aggregation. And link aggregation doesn't make the unit transmit any faster. What it does is it allows the full speed of transmission of 1 gig to happen for 2 separate users at the same time. So when you have just one 1 gig port and you're doing about 130 megabytes per second, let's just say, and somebody else in the building is also making a transfer to or from the NAS at the same time, then that 130 gets split between the 2 to about 60 apiece, thereabouts, 65. By using link aggregation, 1 link goes to one person, 1 link goes to the other, so that it doesn't slow it down for either one of them. But in my opinion, SMB3 multi-channel is far superior, because link aggregation requires that you have a switch that supports it, and it's limited in how it benefits you, company. By being able to turn on SMB3 multi-channel and simultaneously use both LAN ports seamlessly without any further configuration, that benefits the performance of anybody who's got a 2.5 gig network connection, for example. It's plugged into a 2.5 gig switch. They can be pulling from both of those 1 gigs at the same time and get 230 megabytes a second. And it costs nothing, right? It's just a matter of flipping an option on within the Synology. But Synology is only offered that software switch on their Plus models. One of my clients does not have a Plus model. As a result, the only way we can get them to 2.5 gig would be to either do the kludge that I've shown with the USB dongle, which is proven in business to not be very reliable, unfortunately. For home users, it's probably fine. Or replace the unit entirely. They've also, they've had it a couple of years, and they're complaining that it's starting to get a little bit slower in response because they're loading up more and more data on it. So when they do searches, it's got to search through more stuff. It's going to take longer. Having a caching drive would benefit that. And unfortunately, because I couldn't read the future, I was basing my recommendation to my client based on their past needs. Well, their needs are changing. And the Synology unit that I picked isn't going to be able to grow with them. We have to replace it. And we could replace it with a Synology unit that has all these options. But for what Synology wants to charge for that, I think the TerraMaster is a far better value. So right now, my client, when I told them we can solve this problem for $700 by getting that rack-mounted TerraMaster NAS, that should, I mean, I can't say for sure until we test it, but that should resolve the slowness. when I mention slowness, I'm talking about seconds. They said, well, when I did a search, it used to come up like within a second or two, and now sometimes it can take 10 seconds. Okay, well, we can fix that. If 10 seconds is a long time to you, we can repurpose the storage drives that you've got in Synology. We'll just take them out and put them into the TerraMaster and reconfigure the RAID again, and we'll have it hooked up to the 2.5 gig switch. And we'll put an NVMe caching drive in it. And they said, no, it's fine. We're okay with what we have. So I don't know if the complaint was really that sincere. The company's got plenty of money. It would be nothing for them to spend $700. Nothing. I'm not quite sure why they declined it. I was quite surprised. But I offered a solution. And of course, kicking myself that I didn't initially, a couple of years ago when I recommended that Synology rack-mounted system, that I didn't choose a model that was twice as much money, because then I wouldn't be in the situation. And the client, even at twice as much money than what they paid, the client, it's nothing for this client. This client is dealing in legal stuff. So the amount of money they bring in on legal court cases is massive, massive. You know, the kind of cars and homes this guy owns is impressive. And he's not shy about wanting to make sure he gets the good equipment for his office. So he's a real pleasure to work for. He's a super nice guy. But I wasn't talking to him. I was talking to the employee that was letting me know about this issue. And there's a solution. If you want to order it, you let me know when it arrives, and I'll go over and I'll make the change, and you guys won't know any different. You'll still go, it'll still have the same map drive letter going essentially to the same place and the same IP address, and all the same files are in all the same places. It should just be faster. But it's also possible it will not be faster depending on how you use it. You just have to try it to see. And then, of course, we have 30 days to return it if you don't like it. I said, no, we're fine for that. Okay. Shane says you could use the Synology as a backup since they already paid for the equipment, just script it on schedule. Well, I did offer that option to the owner, that we wouldn't just use it as a backup, but place it in his house and let it do the backup from one unit to the other. And he's not interested in that. All right, we've got about 255 people watching live around the world. Jamie McGregor just renewed his support, now a member for 16 months. Thank you, Jamie. Jamie joins us from Scotland. Just looking through. Planet Cryos with a $2 super chat said, I just sent another contribution, but hi, Carey and all. Thank you to Planet Cryos for your continued support. And if you've not checked out Planet Cryos' YouTube channel, he's got some fantastic and very helpful videos. Strongly recommend you subscribe and check out his content. If you like my content, it's more system building and upgrading and repairing videos. So definitely check it out. Cost you nothing. Okay, so I think I'm caught up here. Shane Perkins said, did you look into the Everything search app? I have not. I appreciate sending me the info on it. But right now, the customer has been not calling. They were calling fairly frequently the last couple of weeks. And I think things have settled down, but I don't want to introduce any more disruption to the to the flow. Everything seems like it's flowing really good. So I'm going to leave it until either, a month or two goes by, and then I might introduce it to them. I have to check it out first. But if it's what you say it is, it sounds like it might be ideal for them. Or, I'd much rather put them into a better rack mounted NAS than which is my first choice. And then the search software would be my second choice. But I'm not going to stir the pot. Leave it be for right now. Because I'm busy, got other things going on that's far more important. And they aren't complaining. Now, I mentioned I want to put a liquid cooler on this, and I'm just not sure which liquid cooler. If I go over to Amazon's page that has this case, I often like to look at how the manufacturer has decided to show in other words, did they use a liquid cooler? And if so, what size, what brand? Did they mount it on the top or in the front or both? So if we take a quick look over here at Amazon, here's the Jonsbo D41 mesh. That's what we've got in front of us here on the bench. It's available in black or in white. And it does show they've installed it with a cooler at the top and a fan at the back. Again, this does not include a fan in the back. And it does show us 240 millimeter cooler here and a 360 millimeter cooler here. Of course, there's no hoses or anything. These are just like renderings. See a 360 here. Hard to see what brand that is. Not that I have to use it. Now here they're using a Noctua DH15. Here is another liquid cooler. Here they put fans at the bottom of the case, which I think is really, really dumb. Unless you like to have a computer that's a vacuum cleaner. And then here's the monitor. Instead of having it in the case, you see they've got it just sitting on the desk here. Miraculously, there's no cables. Isn't that fascinating? Even the headphones. Wait, the mouse and the keyboard have cables, but the monitor doesn't have any that we can see, and the computer doesn't have any. Isn't that lovely when they're so clever in their marketing? This shows you where drives can be installed. Don't really give us a whole lot of information. This is our power supply level. We discussed that during Saturday's video. You can raise or lower the power supply. It mounts internally and is wired internally. So I think I would want to do a 360 millimeter. You see, with the 240, they can have the power supply a little higher. 360, they lower the power supply to make clearance for that other fan there. So the question is, which brand all-in-one cooler do I want to use? This is a 12900K. It does get awfully warm. And an all-in-one cooler is strongly recommended for this processor if you care about the aesthetics, right? Because we have a glass panel on the other side, and putting a big Noctua or any tower cooler is definitely not as aesthetically pleasing to look at. It'll also cover up most of your motherboard and your RAM, may even get in the way of your RAM if you have RGB RAM, where the cooler won't sit if the RAM is too tall. And if it does sit, it covers the RAM up, negating the whole point of the RGB RAM that you paid extra for. So when we're going for a certain design aesthetic, then we definitely want to go with an all-in-one cooler for that reason. So let me step in the other room and take a look at what coolers I can use. Now, the folks at Be Quiet mistakenly sent me a all-in-one cooler that's a 240 or 260. My bad, it's a 280. So two 140 millimeter fans that get you to a 280. But I also have a Heller 360, which is the Cougar brand. And that's a full 360 millimeter RGB cooler, which is far more pleasing visually. What else do I have? I know some more. I have the Thermaltake cooler we removed from the hot dog build, but that's just a 260 or a 280, I think. Sorry, I don't think there is such a thing as a 260. It's a 240 or a 280. It's two 120 fans or two 140 fans. So you add those numbers together. That's how I'm getting to 240 and 280. Don't ask me how I'm getting to 260. That's special math. Okay, so there's that cooler, but that's a short one as well. I think this is Hello worthy. Well, you know what? I also have a shorter version of the Hello. I have the 240. Yeah, I have a 240 version of the Hello. I kind of feel like this is 360 worthy. That's what I think. And this, I don't want to go cheap on anything on this computer build, and I think it's deserving of this right here. This is what I used in Robot's Foot, and I was very impressed with it. It's got this, what looks like a little propeller there in the pump, and that's called a flow indicator. As the liquid is flowing through the pump, it rotates that little fan, so it doesn't spin like a fan, like it's not fast, but it's got a nice flow to it. And the pump should always be running at one speed, so it shouldn't be slowing down or going faster. It should just run. And then that's your confirmation that your pump is working. If you just glance over and look, and you'll see the flow indicator spinning. You see the little fan spinning, you know it's working. I think that's a very clever design. And it's all RGB, and we've got that glass panel, and we've got a case big enough to accommodate it. And we're running a 12900K, which can be quite difficult to cool, quite frankly, in my experience. It's a little bit of a beast on the heat side of things. Would the NAS have to have a static IP address? No. If you want to, you can, but no. Just set it to DHCP and just reach out to it via its DNS name. It's net BIOS name, whatever they call that now. Okay, so I guess I need to prep this first and foremost. We won't use the monitor until the very end of the build, so I'm going to just move that out of the way. And I'm going to just rotate the case to free up my bench space here, because we're going to make a little bit of a mess getting the cooler prepped. Just trying to think if I was going to use this in it. I think I was going to use this in one of the NZXT H7s. Debating, should I do? I can always buy another one if I need another. These are pricey, by the way, but you get what you pay for. Let me go ahead and get this out of the way for now as well, because we're going to need to get into that case. And specifically, we need to get to the top for mounting the radiator up here. So I'm going to remove these thumb screws, which appear to be held captive. Slide this back and lift it off. Oh, this looks like such a pleasure to work. So, despite the case's shortcomings, it was so close to being a perfect case, in my opinion. Now, we can take the side panels off without taking off the top. There's no screws or anything. They just click in. This is the glass panel. I'll set that over here. But I have to remove the top because of the mounting of the radiator up there. Okay. So I think I want to go ahead and take this power supply cage out. Might get in our way of mounting the radiator. Let's see, what position do they have it in? They've got it pretty low. They've got it in the third position to the bottom. Can go a little bit lower than that if we need it to. Now we're going to have the hoses for the radiator typically coming out of this side. But this piece is going to cover that. You're not going to see that. It is going to be right near the right near our power supply. Do I want to do that, or do I want to put a 260 in here? Decisions. 260 will probably take care of our 12900K. I just don't know. What do you recommend? Have a 260. Why do I keep saying 260? I mean, whenever I say 260, I'm meaning 240, the smaller version, and then the 280 is the bigger version of the two fan radiators. Or 240. I think the 240, because the 240, we could put it from here to here. That keeps us clear of the power supply. Because when those hoses come out, even if I lower this power supply to its lowest position, it's still going to have a pretty sharp bend to go that way to the CPU, to the water block. Whereas 240, it's a more natural curving. But it may not be an issue, actually, you know, having it. It's not like it's going to bend it 90 degrees. But it will be a sharper bend than what it would do naturally on its own. Probably not harmful. Gary Tatum says he'd do the 240. David Graham says he'd do the 240. All House says 240. Zdravko says 240. Essential Working Too Hard says 240. Nobody is recommending the 360. All right, well, then I'll save the 360 for the NZXT build. Decision's made. Thank you for helping me make that decision. I'll put this back into the pile. Let's see, how do I want to do this? I guess I'll put this here. Here. Yikes. I'll have to rearrange that later. All right, decision made. Moving along. Let's get this out of the way. I've never used the Hello 240. I've only bought one of these, and it was the 360 that's in the robot's foot that's sitting over there. Okay. What we got here? We got some kind of fan controller here. Have our radiator and pump. See, that's a pretty large pump, but I want people to see it. I mean, the whole point is the aesthetic of it all, remember? So I don't want it to be subtle. Got our two fans that are RGB. And each of these fans is 120 millimeter. Raj D says you could put a 120 fan and a 140 fan and get to 260 millimeters. Yeah, sure, why not? You're getting an A in math, however. They do give us some extra coolant, even though it's already filled. Over time, the coolant can evaporate, it can diminish, and this is just meant to top it off from time to time. You really should never need this for the lifetime of the product, in my opinion. I've never once had to top one of these off. Usually, if you're in a situation where you need to top one of these off, you likely are in a situation where you're going to need to replace it because that means a lot of time will have gone by and there could be some corrosion internally. And you can certainly watch some other YouTube channels like Greg Salazar has taken them apart and shown the corrosion that occurs in these. We've got our instruction manual, got a mounting kit. We've got a yellow piece of paper. What is this? It says Heller 240. Then we have a little remote control. So I guess if we want to control the RGB with a remote control, this is optional. Ideally, I would have the RGB controlled by the motherboard, not by a remote. That's all there is. Captain Blinsky with $5 super chat says, no, YouTube, I authorize you getting 30% of my $5 this time. We know how that works. YouTube's going to do what YouTube's going to do. You can say you have my permission or you can say you don't. They're still going to do what they're going to do. I'm sure he meant that as a joke. If we're going to put this in this way, I'm just trying to visualize how we would install this. Go in over on this side of things. Look how easy that fits in there. And then we put the fans underneath, blowing the air out the top. That's the way to do it. So when we turn this over, we got to remember we're going to have it upside down and backwards. So figuring out the fan orientation is always a little bit confusing for me, where I have to kind of stop and think about it for a minute. So this is going to go in this way. So as far as the fans go, we want the cables going out these little holes here, little cable management holes. So I want the cables on the fans pointing towards the back of the case. And where these fan support structures are, this is the direction of airflow. The air comes out this side. This part here that spins, that's the part that draws air in. So, and also shows off the RGB. This whole area kind of blocks the RGB. So we want the airflow going up. If we put the fans on top, we again block the RGB. We ruin the aesthetic. So let's see. I got to visualize this. It's going to go in this way. So that means I need the cables coming out this side, the side that's facing me. And when I put the fans in, I want the supports facing the radiator. So one will go like that. And go like that. We do have two cutouts, so I don't need to have the... A lot of times I'll turn one 90 degrees. Let the cables come out together. Personal choice. In this plastic container, we'll have our screws for mounting all the equipment, from mounting the block to mounting the radiator to the case, mounting the fans to the radiator. It's all in here, or at least it's supposed to be. So this little bag, this will be for the block. We've got a couple of different back plates, which we'll get to later. which again relate to the block. Then we've got this bag, and this bag has some longer screws and some shorter screws. The longer screws are used to go through the length of a fan and into the radiator. That's why only the end of that screw that's really long is threaded. The smaller silver screws, those appear to be for mounting the radiator to the case. Some people will sandwich the radiator to the fans to the case using just one screw. If your case design allows for that and that's your weights of install, you could certainly do that. But that would mean essentially that you would be sandwiching, like if we were putting the case in this direction, we could, instead of screwing the fans in right here, we'd screw the fans in up through here so that at the same time it would secure the fan and into the radiator all with the same one screw. Because I want the fans the other side, I have to have the fan screws on one side and the screws to hold the radiator in coming in from the other side. So we have two different lengths for that reason and to accommodate what your case allows for and what your personal taste accounts for. Choice, having choice is always a good thing. Okay. So I think that's how I'm going to lay it out. And just want to think this through one more time. Is that how I want to run it? I think I will. Yeah, we'll go ahead and keep the cables together like I traditionally do. Why not? Fans are the right direction. Cables are coming out of the side, I think. And it will turn the torque really super low. Really should turn these by hand. Just want to get them started. It's very easy to over tighten the screws, and you'll see if they're over tightened, these corners of the fans will start to bend. That's not a good thing. You don't want your frame to have that much pressure on it. There is little rubber gaskets, if you will, around the screws, and those are to dissipate any vibrational noise from the running fan against the metal radiator. One of the things I like to do for some of the builds is to run the power cables and the RGB cables from the fan behind the support screw. But in this case, I don't really think that's necessary since we're not going to really see the wires one way or the other. It's kind of a pain to run the wires behind the screw because you have to have the screw out to get the wires back there, and then you've got to figure out a way to hold the wires back there with the screw in. Once the screw's in, then the wires will stay back behind the screw, and it's sort of a permanent routing, at least coming immediately out of the fan. So it helps with the cable management a little bit. Or it has the potential to, I should say. So in this case, it really wouldn't make much difference, so I'm not going to bother. Where is it? I think I found it. Once I do the opposite corners, this aligns the fan with the mounting holes. So when these two opposite corners or these two opposite corners are aligned, then the opposite two corners are automatically aligned. That doesn't happen if we do two on the same side necessarily. And that just makes the installation a little bit easier, a little less frustrating trying to get things aligned. Now I'm only aligning two, the other two self-align, versus having to manually align all four the hard way effectively. So when we're building a system where aesthetic is a key component, we're not necessarily looking for the most optimum airflow by some technical minutia of degrees. What we're looking for is the balance of performance, reliability, and looks. And I would say that they're all of equal importance. Some people will push performance and have the ugliest computer you've ever seen. Some people will emphasize looks and have the most beautiful, stunning computer you've ever seen, but it's unreliable and perhaps doesn't perform very well. They put all their money into the glitter, didn't really have a whole lot of substance. I'm trying to find a balance between performance, reliability, and aesthetic. I primarily went with the Cougar Hello liquid cooler because I'm impressed with the way that it looks, the way that it operates, and it's been super reliable. Not that I've used it very much on the robot's foot, and it stands out as a very unique design. You don't see too many water pumps that have flow indicators on them. So it does cost more. I could have bought a cooler for probably half the price of this one, but then it wouldn't stand out. It would just be a standard combination cooler, which may be good enough for you, but not what I wanted. So with the fans on, I should be able to go ahead and mount this. Let me get my glasses. Again, we want to keep our torque really super low here. And I should probably go ahead and remove all the cable, the wire ties now, because once I mount this, space back there is going to be tight. So let me grab, I don't want to sit here and twist each of these off. I don't have all day. Just be careful, don't cut through your wires. Take your time and be mindful what you're cutting. You're going to have a bad day. There's a piece of wire tie that fell in there. There it is. So as long as these are extended, I should have no problem grabbing them and running them through the wire management hole later. I shouldn't have to do that right now. You can if you want to. So I would put this in, again, I would start with one screw in one corner and another screw in the opposite corner. And then that should hold it in place for us while keeping it aligned with the mounting holes to make our installation a little less cumbersome. So I can move this within the slots. I don't really want to hang that off. I want to keep supporting it with my hand because if I let it go, only that one screw's holding that one corner. And that could bend the radiator. I'm going to go to the exact extreme opposite corner from the other side. I just want it loose. I want to tighten it. And as you can see, we have an amount of play here because we're in these slots along the top. And we can adjust where we want to locate this radiator. We can push it all the way to the back here. We can, or this I guess is to the front. We can push it to the back this way, but that might kind of overlap our rear fan. When we have a radiator back here blowing air out the top, we really do not need a rear fan. I just think a computer looks funny without one. especially, you know, we've got this glass panel and we're doing this for looks. So how do I want to align that? I guess we can go all the way to, or do we want to keep the hoses covered by this piece? Yeah, that piece doesn't really cover them. Or do we go somewhere in the middle? I think I want to go as close this way in order to really see the RGB. I think the further we push it to the back, the more likely the RGB won't stand out from this other fan being tucked away. It's just an opinion. Right about there is going to be our position, I think. I can always loosen the screws and align it differently. If I don't like it, change my mind. Now we can tighten those down. No, you know, I do see. So there's space for 2 more screws in the middle on each side. Moved it just a little too far. Let's loosen these a little bit. It's like I'm a screw short. How'd that happen? Not that we necessarily need those up there, but I like to use them. There it is. There's our runner. Okay, so now the furthest I can move it is as far as these middle screws will go. And that's fine. Tighten that down. Again, I have a very low torque setting on this driver. The radiator is made of a very soft metal, and it's very easy to strip it out. So do not over tighten your fan screws or your radiator screws in either case. All right, so that's going to go on. Visualize that with RGB shining down. One of the other things I like about this cooler is how easy it is to install. Now we have these 2 brackets here. And one is probably for AMD and one is probably for Intel. Let's see what it says. For the brackets. Well, apparently we need them both. It's been a while since I've installed one of these, so. It looks like this goes back behind the motherboard. Then I guess this screws on top of it. And then the block screws down these center holes here. Okay, do that. We do have some little factory chads that need to come out. I don't know that I necessarily need to remove them all, but I'm not sure which holes we need, and I don't want to have to do this after the fact, so I'll just take them all out now. See, there's 3 holes. We're probably only going to use the center. Not sure yet. Fix. There we go. And we'll just put these over here for now. Should be able to dispose of those, not miss them. All right, what does it say? For Intel, socket 115X, 1366 and 775. It doesn't say socket 1700 on it. It'll be okay. And I think that's why these are elongated, so it covers the different sockets. Probably should have checked that. I don't like the thermal compound, you know, for what this cooler costs. The fact that they give you a little tear bag of thermal compound is a little stingy. So I won't use that. It's messy. They should have given us a syringe. Okay, so I guess I could mount the motherboard in now and then do this once the motherboard's in place. So I'm going to lay the case flat. And I will go ahead and take these fan cables, get them twisted. And I'm going to run this one out, this cable management hole back here. Slack. Get the power cable for that same fan. Again, we'll take all the twists out of it. We'll run that back here as well. There we go. And I could run through the same cable management hole since I ran the cables together. So here's our other RGB cable for the fan, and that'll go back here. That slack through, and then the final fan power cable. See how they all get twisted up amongst each other. Par for the course when you're doing this kind of work. Put that one right there. Pull that through. Where'd he go? There he is. There we go. So we'll keep those out of our way as we're installing the motherboard. We also still have the case screws for all of the mounting of hardware. That I need to remove from here. That's our front board umbilicals. Let's take all that off. Our case hardware screws, which we need to mount the motherboard, are in that bag there. So with all these cables flopping around loose, we just got to be aware of them. We don't really want to pinch these cables in anything, and we don't want to crush them. We want them out of our way. We'll just lay the case flat and work with gravity. And then in this bag, we're going to have the mounting screws that we need for the motherboard. They've also given us 10 zip ties. Power supply mounting screws. Hard drive mounting screws. Motherboard mounting screws with some extra standoffs. Solid state drive mounting screws. It says SSD right on it. And then 2 additional plastic clips that are in the front of the case where you're snapping that screen on. If these clips would break, they give you 2 spares. Okay, so we'll put this over here. And I'd open the motherboard screw bag here. Where's my scissors? No, I just had them out a second ago. All right, and there is the motherboard screws and a couple of extra standoffs. So now I need to grab the motherboard and we'll test fit it to see if all of the standoffs that are pre-installed are in the right location. If we need to move any, remove any, or add any, we need to figure that out now. Once we determine that, we can secure the board. So here's the board. Now, normally I pick the board up by the heatsink. I've already removed the heatsink to prep it for today. I've not cleaned the top of the CPU, which I will do after the board's installed. So I'm going to just grab it by the edges here, and I'm going to lower it in place. We're going to grab this pump, which is pretty heavy and awkward, and just kind of hang it over the side so it's not in our way. I'm looking at the mounting holes. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We have the standard number of mounting holes in the standard position for an ATX case. And ASUS has given us elongated holes around the CPU, so it will accept the smaller socket 1200 or socket 115X coolers. That's nice that ASUS did that. You may not even realize that when you're building your system, that most motherboards have rounded, very specific location of rounded holes. When you get an elongated hole, that's there for your convenience, that you can use things that are slightly different size without having to purchase a whole different, piece of equipment. So, let's see, I'm still looking at some slack cable here. There it is. I'm going to set this board in here. IO shield is already built onto the board, and I think all of the mounting screws are already in position. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. So then we need 9 screws. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The rest of these, they don't give us reusable bags, so I'll have to, you know what, I'll do it now. I'll just grab a Ziploc bag. Just a standard sandwich size Ziploc, or equivalent, because we should not need any more of this hardware for this build. The power supply should come with its own screws. I haven't decided which power supply I'm using yet. We'll put all that in here. So that's all the extra case hardware. And then if we have extra cooler hardware, I will put that in a separate bag so that the owner of the computer, whoever that turns out to be, won't wonder which is which. We'll keep them separated for that reason. So once again, I just want to start the screws. I don't want to tighten them down because I'm going to need to move and shift the board in order to get it to align properly. We've got to get 9 holes aligned. So you got to start with 1, pick one, anyone. Oops, screwdriver's so fast. Okay. 2, 1 to 9. 3. 4. 5. 6. Seven. And what you can't see is the board slightly shifting a little forward, a little backward, a little up, a little down to get each hole to align. This is our last one, so we can tighten this one all the way. And then just go in any order and get the rest of them tightened down. Again, we've got that extra low torque setting, which is the lowest the screwdriver offers, which is a torque setting of 2. I normally keep it on a torque setting of 3, but I lowered it because of the radiator, and I just haven't put it back because, quite frankly, there's not a big difference as far as putting these other screws in. Double checking my work. 3. Seven. 8. Perfect. 3. As I lift the case, I want to be aware at all times of this pump. I don't want it to flop over and smack into the board. It's heavy and it could permanently damage the board. And that's not a warranty issue. We'll let that just gently set there. And then I'm done with this bag of case mounting hardware, and I'll just throw it in the motherboard box along with any documentation, stickers, antennas, power cable. Everything will go in the motherboard box to the customer, whoever buys this. Unless I decide to keep it for myself. Now, at this point, I don't think we need to keep the top off of it. I think at this point we can put the top back on. Normally, I would say save the putting the panels back on till the end, but this doesn't really look like it's going to be in our way at all, so why not just get it out of the way? It's these 2 thumb screws right here. Just that easy. And as you can see, once again, can help you to visualize. This cooler will go on this orientation, so the word Cougar is visible. Normally, the pipes will go towards the ram, and so that's going to happen in this orientation like this. And then we've got a screw that'll go in the top and the bottom. Sometimes the screws go left and right. And the bracket that we're installing allows for either orientation if you want to twist it around to your preference. It doesn't make a difference in how it actually cools. So these are our front port umbilicals here. And this is all of our fan power and RGB cables here. And I'm just going to pull these through. And I think I will reuse one of those wire ties to temporarily hold these cables together and out of our way. Just want to do it. So we're going to take all the umbilicals and the fan cables, bring them together, just twist tie these cables. Actually, try that again. Just tie them like this. Oops. And that'll just be a temporary solution so that these aren't dragging across the table and getting caught up underneath the case and such. Could inadvertently scratch up the table or knock things off the table or even potentially damage something. It'd be a great looking system. I was planning to put a Noctua 120 back here, but now I'm having second thoughts. I'm thinking I need to put an RGB fan back here. So looking at the back, got this large cutout. And this piece here is to go here. Just looking to see if it matters the orientation. We don't want it touching the back of this, or it'll sit crooked. But it looks like no matter what orientation we put it in, it clears the CPU socket. Now, what happens is on the back of the board, this piece that has foam, this will go to the back of the board. This piece that has no foam, this goes to the front, and then we'll use screws to sandwich these two together, and then the block screws on top of that. And of course, that's all detailed here in the manual, and we'll take a quick look at that, but it should be pretty straightforward. We will use the screws here, this one last bag of screws, which I'll bring up to the camera. This contains all of the mounting screws necessary for Intel or AMD, so you're not going to use all of these. And there's a little plastic washers in there. I'm not quite sure which ones are used where, so for that I will not guess. I will check the manual. And because we don't have socket 1700 specifically in the manual, we're going to follow the steps for Intel 115X, which is shown here in the manual. And of course, you can go to the Cougar website and you can pull this manual up in PDF form. But you see how the standoff and then the washer and then the motherboard backplate and then the screw going top to bottom. And once we've done that, then we affix the top plate to the top of the standoff. The standoff's going to have screws on each side of it. And the standoffs are those long cylindrical things that look like valve stem caps on a tire, like a car tire, except the holes are much smaller. They're about the same size. They look like chrome valve stem caps. At a casual glance. So let's go ahead and cut this open. And we'll dump this on the counter here on the bench. And let me take a quick look in the chat. See what you guys are saying. We've been on now for close to 2 hours. Gary, you need a bigger bench, says David Graham. Yeah, unfortunately, the studio is a bit small for that. When I get into a permanent studio, I will have a much better or appropriate bench. David Ice says hello from West Virginia. Welcome in, David. Michael Dane asked the chat room, are you thinking ASUS Hero 13 motherboard with an Intel i7 700K and 32 gigs of DDR4? $300 is a good price. Well, 32 gigs of DDR4 is about $100. That CPU is worth about 2 something. Let's just call it 200. It's worth more than that. Let's say 200. So you're at 300 just for the CPU and the RAM. So then it's like getting the motherboard for free. But I'm assuming this is used and not brand new. With no SSD, no operating system, no power supply, no case. Just essentially $100 for the board, $100 for the CPU, and $100 for the RAM is effectively a way that we could break that down. Is that a good price? It's a fair price. I don't think it's a steal, but it's also not a ripoff. That's a fair price if everything's in good working condition. Keep in mind the Newegg bundle that I got the motherboard, the DDR5 RAM, 32 gigs, and the 12900K which is 2 generations newer and a step higher, going from an i7 to an i9 for only $100 more, under warranty, brand new from Newegg. So it's up to you to decide if you would rather take advantage of this offer that Newegg has, which again, I will put up on the screen, and I have a link to it in the video notes below this video, for only $100 more. Now, I don't know if you're getting a cooler included in that price. This does not come with a cooler, but it does have built-in Wi-Fi on the board, and it is DDR5, 6,000 speed RAM, 32 gigs total. So your call. That'll be new and under warranty, and it'll be a much newer generation. Now, without this sale, this is almost half price. This is usually about a $700. To buy the board, to buy the RAM, to buy the chip, $700 usually. So that's a really good deal. At the end of the day, Michael, I guess it's up to you to decide. What do you guys think in the chat room? Which way would you go? Step aside here for just a second. I was grabbing a roll. I was feeling a bit peckish. Okay, so these short screws are going to be used to mount that top plate to the bottom plate. Take 4 of those out, set them over there. This weird screw with a spacer shoulder on it. 2 of those, what are those for? Quite sure. Leave those over there. Here's our 4 spacers. Oh, it looks like we're going to use every single part here. That's unusual. So the instructions are telling us to use the foam and to run the screw through the corner slot here. And then on the other side, we would place one of these nylon washers and affix one end of the standoff. Don't know which end we're supposed to use. There's a hollowed out end, and then there's a flush end. Face toward the flat side to the motherboard. Well, I guess that answers that. So the flat side goes towards the board, and I will screw that on. We'll keep it a little loose. We'll do another screw, opposite corner for the same reasons I've already explained. The washer. Stand off flat side towards the motherboard. Okay. Then we just do the same with the remaining 2 screws. Sure. Standoff. Very easy cooler install. I mean, as far as liquid coolers go, you've seen me struggle with some of the cheaper coolers. I haven't sworn once during this install. There's the last screw right there. Last washer, last standoff. Again, making sure to put the flat end of the standoff towards the motherboard and the hollowed out end. I'll show this to the camera real close so you can see what I'm referring to. This little standoff, again, that looks like a valve stem cap for a car tire. It's hollowed out on the top. Bottom is completely flush. And it's this flush end that goes to the motherboard, so that when it's screwed down to the board, you should be looking at the hollowed out end on all four of these standoffs. Now, you're not going to use any tools to tighten these down. You're going to tighten them with your fingers until you can't turn them anymore. Then this foam back here on this plate is going to squish down. And once it gets hard to turn, like you could probably just keep turning and turning until you squish the foam until it's almost completely useless. But if you wait until it gets really super hard to turn, that's where I would stop. If you go at it with a screwdriver from this side, you might, as I mentioned, you might flatten this foam out. And that would make the foam less effective at trying to be gentle to your motherboard. Provide insulation from the metal bracket from the back of the circuit board. So I just go around so all four of them feel more or less about the same level of tension. Sometimes when you tighten up three of them, the prior one, or when you tighten up all four, the first one you tighten might feel loose now. So that's because you're sort of tightening down one side more than another. So by going back around, and it doesn't matter what order you go in, you can feel the tensions should feel about the same all the way around. So that is what it looks like from this side of things. And this is what it looks like from the back. It's a nice clean install. I really like it. This cooler is an expensive cooler, but it's expensive because it's good. It looks great. It's easy to install. It's been quiet, reliable. It's very unique looking. Why do I have a spare washer? Did I leave a washer out somewhere? I think I did. I think on the last one I didn't put the washer on. Wait a minute. I see the washer. 1, 2. No, you know what? I think they just gave us a spare washer. Let me look with a flashlight just to make sure I'm not seeing things. I think manufacturers think they're doing you a favor when they give you extra parts, but it makes me nervous. Yeah, we're using all 4 nylon washers there. What do they even call those? Do they call those washers? Sometimes they have their own little names they use. Let's see. Spacers. They're calling those spacers. The chrome things, they're calling standoffs, which I was calling them. They're referring to this plate as the back plate and this plate as the retention bracket. These are the mounting screws. These are going to go through the water block into the mounting retention bracket. That's what these little funky looking screws are, what hold the block, secure the block on. Said they gave us a scraper too. It's like a little spatula for spreading thermal compound. I don't see it. I wouldn't use it if I had it. But it says it's included. Show the little baggie. I'll use my nitrile glove to spread the thermal compound, and I'll use my thermal compound, not theirs. All right, so with that done, the next step, I'm gonna bring this back down. going to work with gravity. We're going to be aware of all of these cables here. And again, it doesn't seem to matter what orientation. It's going to align in any of the orientations. That's a really smart design. Then we'll use these short screws and we're going to affix that retention bracket down into the standoff. I'll use my electric driver and I'm going to do one corner, then the opposite corner. Now, one of the things I'm a little bit concerned about is the oblong holes for these screws. Because what that means is we can move this retention bracket, once we have all 4 screws, oh, you know what? It really doesn't move at all. I was worried it was going to be able to slide like a 1/4 inch left, right, up, or down, but it doesn't. It appears that the screws more or less go where they go. And it also appears there's no upside down to this bracket. It doesn't look like it needs to go this way or this way, that it would work either way. And so with the bracket on there, the only other thing I would do is I would tighten these a bit more by hand, because again, I have the tension set pretty low. And if you don't normally use an electric driver, you probably shouldn't use one for building, just out of safety. It's easy to strip a screw or over tighten a screw. I always check everything by hand, but if I just would have turned them by hand, I built thousands of computers, and so I would have carpal tunnel long ago if I didn't use an electric driver. So just because you see me doing it doesn't necessarily mean that's the best way to do it, unless you have a lot of experience with electric drivers and feel for when screws strip and how tight they are. Electric screwdrivers are fine for taking things out. Removing screws, no worries. Use an electric driver to your heart's content. So when we're putting things together, you just want to be ultra careful not to strip the screws, not to cross thread the screws, and not to over tighten the screws. Now that's pretty much all there is to mounting that bracket. It's really super easy. So at that point, with the bracket installed, we now put the block on whatever orientation we want. I've already shown you my preferred orientation. And we will use these 2 screws to go either into the holes in that retention bracket on the left and right, or in the case of the way I'm installing it, at the top and bottom. It's a really well-engineered and thought-out design that the bracket is so forgiving to socket type. It's so simple and easy to secure it and install it, compared to the frustration you've seen me deal with other cooler manufacturers. And that it equally works with the bracket one way or the other, with the retention bracket, with the cooler in any orientation, with the different socket types. Even though it doesn't specify socket 1700, it clearly works just fine on socket 1700. So that's a good engineering design. Also, a lot of times the cooler manufacturers will give you a bunch of parts for AMD and a bunch of different parts for Intel. The way that they've designed this, it appears that if you're using an AMD motherboard, you will have some screws left over. Just want to verify. No, you won't. This will exactly install the same exact way, using the same tools, the same brackets, the same screws, and the same orientation. You're just going to remove the plastic CPU cooler mount that all AMD motherboards come with, that socket AM4 motherboards, and I guess AM5 motherboards. You'll take those out. I recommend you keep those, the stuff that came with the motherboard. This replaces it, and it goes on exactly the same way. That's pretty rare to see a CPU cooler mount that works the same on AMD as it does on Intel, without separate parts and different screws. I'm impressed. Okay, so now I need to lay this back down. And I'm going to grab my isopropyl alcohol, 99%. We want this as pure as we can get it. I'm going to clean the top of the CPU because when I had the suction cup on it, it left a little residue. And then when I had the other cooler, the stock cooler without any thermal compound, looks like it's just left a little smudge. And it probably really doesn't affect our cooling by any measurable degree, but it only takes a second to clean it. Since we're building something that has this value, let's build it right. Whether or not it really makes a difference doesn't really matter. It's about taking pride in what we do, going a little bit overboard, not too much so, to be very thorough and to cover all the bases, whether they need to be covered or not. So we do things consistently, and we get consistent results. Okay. Really nothing came off. All right, we're going to let that isopropyl alcohol evaporate. And while that's evaporating, I'm going to grab my thermal material, which I will use. Which one do I want to use? I got a bunch here from Scythe. I've got some Noctua. I don't think I'll use the Noctua. We'll use that up. And then I will grab one of my nitrile non-sterile powder-free gloves. The doctor will see you now. Okay, see if I missed any questions in the chat. Miss anything? It's good. I'm not dealing with people challenging me. Wow. That usually only happens on members only video. Okay, go ahead and lay down some compound here. I think that's more than enough. Let me get my glasses so I can see. And we're just going to finger paint the thermal compound. I've got lots of other videos I've done showing lots of close-ups of this process. I've probably got 30, 40, 50 videos where I show the close-up of this. So I don't really feel it's necessary for me to show it close-up every time. And since Camera Girl is not here today, we'll just make do as best we can. It's pretty. I like it. Okay, and I turn the glove inside out, and that keeps thermal compound from getting all over everything. With that done, the next step is to mount the block. So with the block, there's some protective tape that's keeping the surface of the block free of oils from your skin, dust in the air. So you don't want to remove this protective plastic layer until you're absolutely ready to install. That's where we're at now. If you forget to remove this, you will probably find very high temperatures, and you'll say, I don't know why Carey likes this cooler so much. My CPU is... It's a simple mistake. We've all done it. And which orientation did I say I was going? I was going to go this way. I will center that right over the holes and we'll grab a screwdriver here. keep it loose. The other one, we don't want to tighten these down one at a time. We want to try and kind of tighten them down together. And that way we can ensure that the block is sitting flush against the CPU. Since we can't really tell by looking at it, since it's way down low, you could sort of warp it. And if you tighten one screw down first and then the other one, it might only be making contact with half of your CPU or 3/4 of your CPU. Once again, you're going to get high temps. You're going to not understand why, because from the naked eye, everything looks flush. I've demonstrated that in a video where where I took a liquid cooler pump off and the pre-applied thermal material was untouched. Half of it still had the factory pattern. So it was sitting cattywampus, and the thermal material gave that away because it was untouched, half of it. Thought we might have had a bad block, but we just had a bad install. And that was something a customer brought to me. That wasn't something I did, just so we're clear. Okay, so now we have a couple of cables. Let me just pick this up. It's coming together. It's looking really nice. There's a couple of cables that come off the block. One is the CPU power cable, or CPU cooler power cable. And we can plug that directly into the power supply, or we can plug it into the CPU fan header on the motherboard, or if there's an all-in-one pump header on the motherboard, we can use that. We can often go into the BIOS and tell the CPU cooler header to be on full time. You always want your block running at full speed at all times. Your fans, on the other hand, those can spin up and spin down. The hotter the system gets, you want the fans to ramp up. But we don't want the fans on full all the time. They're too noisy, and they also draw in air. They draw in dust, rather. So the pump, you want that running full speed at all times. So on this motherboard, do we have a pump header? CPU fan, what's the other one say? CPU optional. So I guess we can plug into the CPU fan and just go into the BIOS and tell it it's a liquid pump, so it'll run full. So I will plug that in. That fan header is a different color than all the other fan headers. There are some motherboards that won't boot if they sense there's no CPU fan. Hey, moron, you don't have a fan. We're not going to overheat your CPU. Fix this and then boot again. So my preference is to use the CPU fan header for that reason, versus going into the BIOS and saying, hey, ignore the CPU fan header, don't monitor it. Then this other cable that comes off of our water block here, this appears to be controlling RGB. And so one of the things that sucks about when you put a liquid cooler in and it has an RGB cable is there's no easy routing for this cable that can be easily hidden, because we're effectively smack dab in the middle of the motherboard. What are we going to do? Drill a hole in the motherboard? So we have to come up with a clever way to route that so it's kind of blends in with the background. So I need to just take a look at this for a second and see which way would I route this. I think I will go up, out the same hole I'm using for the fan power, right through here. And then I will route the cable between the retention lever on the last, or the first RAM stick, or socket rather, because it's empty, and the VRM heatsink. And if I can get that routed right in between those two, It'll look pretty good. I think that's about as close as we're going to get it. And then I will also have to run a zip tie on the main CPU power cable, or the pump power cable. Now I can remove this earlier wire tie that I had placed here to hold our umbilicals and fan power and all that other stuff out of the way. And then that's where we need this little controller box. This is going to control the RGB and the fans. And it enables you to add quite a number of fans. It's a little fan controller and RGB controller both. This is the thing your remote control that I showed you earlier would communicate with. And if I bring this up to the camera, show you something Cougar does that I really like here. First of all, things are very well labeled. Those are the fans, those connectors there, those wide ones. And then the little one end is the LED. It's the same on both sides. And then on this side, it's power input. And what's that say? M in. I'd have to look up the documentation of what that is. Nothing on this side. And there are two magnets here on the back. So you can attach it back behind the motherboard without using any tape. Very well thought out. So just to simplify this, just to get it up and running as quickly as possible, we will take the small 4-pin cable that's coming off of the block. And that's going to go onto one of the LED connections. And I'm going to run all my cables all on the same side of this. And then that way I can put this, magnetically. I could perhaps stick it there, for example, with all the cables coming in, and I don't have to wrap anything underneath. Now we have the fan power cables, but I don't know why we have fan power cables if we have these big connectors. Oh, these may be just RGB only. I don't know. There is no USB connection to the block, so there's not going to be any software for us to download. You may see that as a good thing. You may see that as a bad thing. I see it as one less cable, one less piece of software I got to worry about updating and securing. So I will put the two fan connections on here. These connectors only go on one way, and this little fan box and distribution unit still has room for 2 more fans on the top and 4 more on the bottom with another LED connector on the bottom. Now, if this is the only RGB on the system, then I suppose I don't need to worry about putting an RGB fan back here unless it fits with Cougar, or I can't get the RGB to sync. This doesn't have an ARGB header, I guess, so we're going to use the remote to control the RGB, and then that'll be the only RGB up here. And I think I'm going to leave a fan off of here for right now. Now we have the rest of our front port umbilicals, and we've got this connection here. And this is power. Oh, this is an ARGB. That's what the MN is for. So we could alternately plug the ARGB cable into the motherboard and then the white end here into this controller, into the white port here. And then, of course, we have to give it power, and that's going to come off of a standard SATA connection off the power supply. And so that's what this cable is for. The block is going to get power right off the motherboard, This power cable is strictly for the fans. So that'll go in here on our fan controller. And I do want to use the ARGB, so I can use the motherboard software. I'd much prefer that than a hardware switch. It's more versatile. That will go into this MN. I don't know why it's called N. Probably the documentation explains that, but it's the only place it'll fit on the whole controller. So it's pretty obvious where it goes. And then I can magnetically just stick that right back there. The ARGB header can go onto the ARGB header on the motherboard, which is where? All the way at the bottom. So we can run this down here. Yep. Totally run this down here. And right into the ARGB header. This motherboard has two of them side by side, which is really nice. An extra little connector. It's a one or the other type situation. You would never use them both. I want to get rid of that slap extra connector. There we go. And then it's time for front port umbilicals, and then we're done. We can fire it up. I guess we're going to have to plug these fans in. I'm just curious if that will provide the fans with power. I don't think it will, since I only see 3 wires. Normally, if it's going to provide the fans with power, they would not give us separate power cables. So I'm going to guess we're going to have to plug these in. And my question then is, where do I want to plug them in? I have a couple of fan headers down here on the bottom of the motherboard. And these cables are super long, which is, again, thoughtful manufacturer to make sure they're giving us ample cable length here. And can run one down here. I guess we still have to put a power supply. You can run down here and into this lower fan header, but it's right next to our power switch, reset switch header. And then the other fan, because these can run independently, they don't have to run the same speed. That one we will run down through this other cable management hole down here. Is it down here? No, over here. One more over. Is that how I want to do it? Yeah, I think that's how I want to do it. I'll clean up the cabling later. We just want to get this thing up and running at this point, make sure that everything's still okay. I guess I could have run it over here too. I see another fan header down here. So I'm using one fan header here and one over here, but there's a third one right there in the middle. But there's no cable management cutout. It kind of sits between the two cable management cutouts. So I feel like that's a cleaner look. They all work the same, so it's just at the end of the day, it's a judgment call. Not really going to get it wrong, no matter which way you choose. Now I've got the USB 3.1 connector that's going to go on one way or the other. No, didn't like that. Straight. because I've got to be twisted. Something's wrong. Most people will twist the cable around however they need to, and then their cable management's going to be a nightmare. So I'm trying to get this aligned so that it's not folding in on itself. I want to go in. There it goes. Yeah. It's a little twisted, so I'll have to fix that. These are just the two connections we have for one's for the power LED, the other's for the power switch. There is, as I mentioned earlier, no hard drive LED and no reset switch. So those will run through the bottom here. And they will go into the standard position on all ATX motherboards regarding the front port cables. The power LED positive cable going on the first connection on the top row, furthest to the left, the end of the connection. Negative cable goes on the next pin beside it, and then the power switch goes on the next two pins besides those. And that's it. That's the power switch and power LED. Finally, we have our USB Type A3 connection here, and that will go it's going to go right there. And then finally, we have our front port audio microphone headphone jack. That always goes all the way down to the furthest corner at the bottom of the board. So it's nice when a case manufacturer gives you that consideration with a cable management cutout hole down in the bottom left. So that way you don't have to run this across the bottom of the board where it's unsightly. If you're building a case with a glass panel, you're obviously caring about the aesthetics. So we can run that cable right through there like so. And then that plugs in this bottom connector. It has a pin missing here on the top. Sometimes the pin is missing on the bottom. That indicates which orientation, depending on the motherboard manufacturer and how they've engineered the board. So then finally, we just have to put the power supply in. We're going to give the motherboard power, and then we give the LEDs power, and we're done with the build effectively. Because on the prior video, we prepped the motherboard. We already have Windows installed. There still may be some drivers, but at this point now it's going to boot into Windows once we get the power installed. So the question is, what do I want to use for power? And I have a few options here to consider. You know, if we were going to put a GPU in there, we definitely want 750 or better. Don't think I have a 750 modular. I might. Don't know. You see, it's an EVGA. It's not it. It's not it. That's not it. I have this EVGA 750 brand new in a box, but I don't know if it's modular or not. There's one way to know. Put it up and take a look. Barry Russ with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Barry. Now you'll notice I built this opposite of the first one. The D31, we put the power supply in first. On the D41, I'm putting the power supply in last. There's no right or wrong way, just the way I decided to build them based on how I was feeling at the time. Oh, yeah, this must be modular because we have a bag. Velcro, power cable. Motherboard power is here. We need that one. That one. Bag. CPU power. We need that. SATA cable. That's Molex. That's not SATA. They're not using that one for sure. Mounting screws. We'll definitely want those. VGA power. We don't need that, but if we want to add a GPU in the future, we'll definitely need that. This is CPU power here. And I think this board actually has a connection for 2 of those. There's our SATA that we need to power the fan LEDs. Another SATA. There's another SATA. There's another VGA power. Another VGA power, that's 3. Another VGA power. So I guess they considered running an SLI, 2 sets of graphics cards with 2 power cables each. But we don't have a second EPS power connector. Now on this motherboard, it is optional to add that second one, and it's primarily used for providing additional voltage when overvolting or overclocking. And since we're not doing that, we don't need that. They've also given this plug that you could plug into the end of the motherboard power, that instead of plugging into the motherboard, you plug it into this little piece and it turns the power supply on. You would use that if you were making a custom liquid cooler and you needed to prime the pump without turning the system on. I never use those. We've got some silica gel. We've got a pretty thick documentation manual. And then we have the power supply itself, which they give you this bag that is totally unnecessary since they've already given us this bag. This bag is just a waste of resources and adds unnecessary cost to the power supply, in my opinion. There's our power supply right there, EVGA 750G3. This is 80 plus gold certified. And it does have a CPU 1 and a CPU 2 connector here. So you'd think they would have given us 2 EPS connectors. SATA, CPU. Oh, there is a second one. Stupid me. So we will use it. I mean, if we got it, we'll use it. I thought it was weird it didn't come with it. I just took it out and forgot I took it out. All right. Good enough. Good enough. Let's clear some of this out of the way so I have some space. We're going to use these 4 screws. And I will keep this little baggie because these are really handy when I have to cut through the manufacturer's bags. Then I have nothing to put the spare screws in that secures. So with these little Ziplocs, I will use those again. Documentation for both the cooler and the power supply can go into the motherboard box, along with these Velcro ties and this power cable. This thing that turns it on, I usually just put those in a drawer. I don't typically give those to the customer. There's no reason a customer should need that. What do I do with the motherboard box? Oh, it's down here on the floor. So I'm going to put the power cable in there. We won't use this. There is a fan splitter in there too. If we had limited fan headers on the board, we could just plug into one fan header and let that one fan header control the 2 fans. The Velcro ties, customer can have those. Documentation, customer can have that. Then of course, these spare modular power cables will also go to the customer. It was too big to fit in the box. So it goes on top of the box. It's back here on the floor where it belongs. Just pick up some of this trash and move it out of. So to mount the power supply into this case, it's a bit unusual because we're actually mounting the power supply to the front of the case. And so that means we have to remove a couple of screws that hold the power supply in. So that means we take the bottom piece off, it just pulls off. We'll set it aside where we're not going to accidentally step on it. It will bend really easy. And then there's a screw here and a screw here. When we take those out, then the power supply cage will lift out. The other thing I want to do is I want to take this piece out right here so that we can reach the power supply to plug our cables in when we're all cabled up. This will cover those cables up from being seen from the glass side of things. So let me get my glasses and let's very quickly remove this. Okay, there's the panel. Screws for the panel. There. And then the power supply cage. A 1. A 2. Take the power supply cage out. And go. Let's see, do we want to go this way? And have our fan drawing air in from inside the case? Or do we this way? So last time, I did it this way so that the air was getting drawn in from the front of the case, which I think makes more sense. Either way will work and will be acceptable. Temperature-wise, it'll be insignificant one way or the other. So it's really a personal choice. There's an internal power cable in this case, and that's going to connect our power button through, our power connection rather. It's going to plug in back here, and there's an internal extension cord that then plugs into the power supply. So it keeps the power supply out of sight, out of mind. And I just want to tighten those screws down beyond my low torque setting here because the power supply is pretty heavy, and these are pretty small screws to hold that weight. So I want to make sure that nice and secure in there, that they're not going to vibrate loose in shipping. If that power supply falls out during shipping, it'll bounce around the inside of the computer and destroy everything it hits. So all of our connections are going to be basically on the bottom of this. This would be a good time to put them on right now, because once we hang this, it'll be hard to see underneath. Not impossible, just easier to do it right. So I'll start with the big one. That's the motherboard power connector. The large side, the 1 connector, goes to the motherboard. The split side goes to the power supply, and it only fits, each one of these plugs only fits in one place, and they are right beside each other for obvious reasons. So that connects motherboard power. Then we have 2 CPU power connections, and this does say CPU 1 and CPU 2 on it. So we can identify which end goes to the power supply. The end that's split goes to the motherboard because the motherboard may take a 4-pin or it might take 2 4-pins together. The side that goes to the power supply does not split. It's got a thinner connection that's in the middle. This connection will not align. It's 3 times wider and it won't plug in that side. Don't force it. Doesn't matter which cable that we use for CPU 1 and which cable we use for CPU 2 for CPU power. They're the same cables. Doesn't matter. some power supply manufacturers will write PSU on the side that goes to the power supply. It does matter. And then we have the SATA cable that we need. And we've got on this power supply, we've got a SATA 1, SATA 2, SATA 3, peripheral 1, and then we have VGA 1, VGA 2, VGA 3, and VGA 4. So it's a very well-equipped power supply. I like to try and keep these cables as close together as possible. So we'll just kind of group them all together here. And then this is going to be flipped up right. Take these twists out. And then we can set this in any of 4 positions here on the front of the case that determine the height of the power supply inside so as not to interfere with, I'm going to turn the hybrid mode on so the fan only spins when it needs to. But yeah, so this way we can keep the power supply as high up or as low down as we need it to be to make clearance for everything else. So basically it starts by you just hanging the power supply and evaluating if it's going to meet your clearance that you want. And what I've done here is I've actually mounted it on 2 different dudes. It's crooked. There. That looks pretty good to me. So to lock that in, I just simply put the 2 screws back in that hold that up front. Very easy, well thought out. It may sit a little sideways, so if you're not seeing the mounting holes, don't freak out. Probably just need to give it a little nudge so it's not tilted. But it is installed correctly. Now, for these cables, like the big motherboard power connector, the 2 CPU power connectors, we can run all of these out through this major cable management area right there. You see my hand? Run that one back here like this. The other CPU power. Oh, that's the SATA. We need that one back here. I want them all back here. Whichever one is the one that gets grabbed is the one I'm grabbing. I'm not necessarily going for specific cables here. They will all come back here. Motherboards here, back here as well. And we just pull those all through. And of course, we have the extension cable that's got to plug in. And I have made a terrible habit, apparently, not paying attention of this cable when I put the power supply in. And sometimes I trap the cable. I trapped it a little bit, but not enough where the power supply had to come out. If I did have to take the power supply out, it's just the 2 screws and it comes out. So would not have been devastating, but that's going to plug in just like that. Super easy. And this time it doesn't go over the power button on this power supply design. The power button is parallel instead of running across. It's actually the position of the power connection. They've rotated it 90 degrees compared to the other power supply I used last time. So definitely the EVGA, the 750 G3 that we're using is a good fit for this case, along with all of the connections that it allows for, like I said, 2 video cards if you were running. Nobody does that anymore, but I've had this power supply for a while. It's been sitting brand new in a box for some time. And that was how they used to sell the fancy ones. So here's our motherboard power connector, and I'm just going to turn that around on itself. Plug it in. There, I really don't like that twist. It's better. Seat in there and push the slack out behind here, so it'll be a nice clean install. Up here at the top, we'll have an 8-pin and a 4-pin CPU power connection. So I will run these cables. Let's see. I want to try and keep them away from everything else here. Worry about cable management later. It's hooked up and running at this point. 2 of our CPU power cables. We'll put the 2 4s together. Pull all the slack in so I can have the ability to turn the cable towards the board, which is effectively the direction it's coming from. It's like turning it in on itself. But I need to in order to get the slack that I need to align it with the socket, and then I pull the slack back out. And then we'll repeat that with the other CPU power cable, which is optional, as I mentioned. Oh, and this is the SATA. This is our SATA power cable. And it doesn't matter which of the 3 connectors we use. Just going to align that and plug it in. And then we'll work on hiding these cables and cable managing them if everything works as a final step before putting the panel back on. So with our final CPU power connection here, we bring them both in through the cable management hole, which is now being partially blocked by the previous cable. And I want all the slack I can get here. And I don't like that route. I want to change this cable's route because it's in the way of its sibling. How do we want to do that? Let's see. Bring that up this way, through here, through here, through here. Back in the day when we didn't do cable management, it didn't really matter. You just connected your cables and then just grabbed all your spare cables into a bundle and one zip tie and you're done. Those are the good old days. Now we still have not hooked up the front screen, and I'm not worried about that for right now. I can put this piece back on. Which way did this go? Can't remember which way I took that off. I think it goes this way. I think. Can't remember if the Johns Plus Studio writing was at the bottom or if it was at the top. I think it was at the bottom. I'd have to rewind the video and see. It's just an aesthetic. It bends in here. This is why I think it goes this way. But it will go on either way. The screws do line up. Paul says it was on the bottom. Seems like it was on the bottom. It's just an aesthetic. You could turn it around and put it to the top if you want to. So as I mentioned, we have not hooked up the screen. But with the power supply now in, I can put the front half of the bottom on here. And for the sake of looks, I can put this piece back on just so it'll look pretty. Again, the monitor that fits in here is optional. You don't have to use it. This does only go on, it only aligns one way. It won't click in. And now we can just start hooking up keyboard, mouse, monitor, and power, and internet, since we already have Windows installed. So let's do that now. Let's turn it this way. You guys can see it. And I'll grab my keyboard and mouse from down here. Turn those on. I'll plug the dongle in up front. That way we can test to make sure that that connection works. Two birds in one stone. We'll grab a power cable from right here. And that will plug in right back here. And then we'll grab our HDMI cable, plug that into the motherboard, and our Ethernet cable to the Ethernet port. And now, aside from some cable management and hooking up the monitor, which we don't want to do until we verify everything we've done works anyway. You don't want to get too far ahead of yourself. Let me turn on HDMI input on my OBS software. Let me put myself in a corner here. Actually, you know what? Let's not, because then you won't see the beauty of this thing lighting up. So let's go ahead and hit the power button, which is right down here. And I want to see those fans spinning and the flow indicator turning. It's dead silent, by the way, not making any noise at all. I will now turn off camera 1 so we can see if this is booting. It is booting. Da, 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 da. There we are. Updates are underway. Just in time. All right, so now we'll go to Start button, settings, grab updates. Probably missing quite a few. Okay, now that's going to wrap it up for today's video. We're on for what, 3 hours on this one. That's with the motherboard already being prepped, and that's only possible without disruptions from the chat room interfering with the flow. That's why I've turned that members only on chat today, because I wanted to get this done, and I knew at the regular pace that I work at, while explaining everything as I'm doing it, we were likely going to be at around 3 hours. And that's why I'm not going to hook up the monitor today, because we'll be here another half an hour. And I won't run Prime 95 today, because we'll be here another half an hour on top of that, which means it's a whole nother hour. So I will follow up with a final part, and perhaps we'll do that in the final part, or maybe I'll get it done off camera and then just show you the final product, since we've already covered the monitor installation on the prior video with the Jonsbo D41 case. This is going to be exactly the same. But I might save it for camera, I might not, I'm not sure. Thank you guys for hanging out with me today. And again, if you have any questions, this is the time to ask them, as I say thank you to everybody who has so generously contributed to the broadcast today. Acordius Technology, Barry Russ, Peter VZ, Captain Blinsky, Jamie McGregor for renewing your membership, as well as Matthew Burden also renewing membership. Stan Aristoff and Planet Cryos, thank you for your continued super chat support. Zdravko renews his membership as well. Thank you, Zdravko. Thank you to our good friend Michael Dane. He's the man. Planet Cryos, as a reminder, has a YouTube channel. Be sure and check his videos out. Thank you, Planet Cryos, for your contributions today, as well as Peter VZ and Dorado Systems. Welcome David Graham as a new member, and also as a $5 super chat supporter earlier today. So I appreciate you guys very much. You're the reason that this content exists. Flat out, without you guys, I can assure you today's video would not have been about a build. Let me check my phone real quick, and we'll just see if I'm missing anything here. $5 PayPal from Thomas Tidwell. Thank you, Thomas. Frankie B sends an Amazon gift card. Very generous. Thank you so much, Frankie B. And that is it. We are all covered. So let me go back over temporarily to camera 1 here. There it is. I have to find the buttons and say thank you again for hanging out with me today. And the system will be available for sale. If you're interested, do send me an email. And we handle these conversations privately and not publicly. If you're not sure how to email me, hit the About page on the YouTube channel, and it's right there. Other than that, if you have any comments or questions, of course, leave them below the video. Be sure and if you enjoy the video, hit the thumbs up, hit the subscribe button if you're not subscribed. And yeah, I'm not sure if I'm live tomorrow or not. I usually run errands on Wednesdays, so you want to stay tuned, find out. You can follow me on Twitter and on Facebook if you want to get a heads up when I'm going live. Sometimes the YouTube notifications are not reliable. Gregory Howard just contributed $20. Thank you, Gregory. Thank you for your continued support. And thanks for being cool in the chat room. Appreciate that very much, if you can't tell. Today's video went much smoother without those disruptions and challenges. I will see you all again very, very soon. Thank you to Camera Girl for today's thumbnail, tags, keywords, all done in the video. And to my sister for creating the intros and outros that we use. I have to grab the right mouse and I have to find an outro. I think I'm going to use my standard as soon as I find it. Thanks to Mitch Morrison for sharing his vacation with us, and we'll look forward to hopefully getting some more video fresh from Vietnam and his trip there on vacation. I'll see you all again very, very soon. We will follow up a final video on this, running the Prime 95, looking at the CPU temps, etc. We're going to see a massive difference in cooling. If this 240 millimeter works anything like the 360, it's going to be impressive. I'll see you all very, very soon. And until next time, bye for now.